Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the DLF Trade Show. Still the best trade show on the DLF YouTube channel. Yes, 3 weeks in a row. Bam. All right. Well, first of all, happy birthday, buddy.
Dang it.
You
I hope
think I
you wouldn't
wasn't
bring it up.
going
No.
to just, I mean, at least on the plus side, you're just going to get a lot of, oh, hey, happy belated birthdays tomorrow when this actually comes out. But right now, I get to be the one to just say, happy birthday, buddy.
Thank you. Now we can move on.
Ripe old age of 22. Yes, we are moving on because DLF Trade Show, not DLF Happy Birthday Addison Show. Our last suggestion that we got that we were excited to do because what's a good word? He is your split. It's a split thing on him. Like either you love this guy or you hate him. And
Yeah.
I am excited to talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire because I remember a couple of shows ago that you said that this guy has top 5 running back upside.
I'm sorry. I still think he does.
No,
which
that's
is crazy, right? Is that crazy?
I mean, yes, it's crazy, but I was curious to start this show off with if that has changed for you with anything you've seen this season, because at least the concerns I said out loud when we were talking about it is the biggest thing was lack of receiving work, having nothing to do with Edwards-Helaire because we know he can catch the ball. It's just not something that Kansas City does, so it's not something he's going to get the opportunity to do. He's been seeing goal line work, which is actually pretty great because that's something he didn't see much of besides that first game last year where he got stuffed like 5 times in a row.
Yeah.
But do you, Addison, still think Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the offense they are in right now has top 5 running back upside?
Like I still do, but things need to change.
What exactly needs to change in the best offense in the league?
The receiving workload for him. Like for some reason, they think that throwing to Mecole Hardman and Demarcus Robinson like 10 times a game is better than giving the ball in screen routes or getting Clyde actual routes from the slot. They seem to think that that is somehow a better game plan than just giving receptions to Clyde, who is arguably one of the best pass catching running backs that we have seen in the past couple of years, that also has, the actual workhorse ability to run between the tackles and not like a Kenneth Gainwell type of receiving running back. And to not utilize him as such is just so weird to me. Like I understand like not giving him goal line work because he is like 5'9", 180 pounds or something like that. Not that I don't think he can't do it. I understand why they wouldn't want to go that route. But the PPR value, why they why they couldn't utilize him as DeAndre Swift, why they want to utilize him as Jonathan Taylor is really, really weird to me. And if he was utilized more as DeAndre Swift, we're seeing it right now. DeAndre Swift is a top 5 fantasy running back. And if that continues, he will be a top 5 running back at the end of the year. So that, I believe, still gives me top 5 upside optimism for CEH, but we're not seeing it now, which is why he doesn't have it now. But like if things were to change, and that's something that I think could very easily change, even in an Andy Reid offense, especially in an Andy Reid offense, then we could easily see Clyde still have top 5 upside. But I don't know. Maybe I still have my rose-colored glasses on, and it's just
You do.
I love
take
Clyde.
those off a little bit. I mean, what is it with this current trend of taking running backs who did a really good job of receiving in college, no less, and just not throwing them the ball? Sony Michel, Josh Jacobs, and now CEH. Like it's
Antonio
just
Gibson.
And that offense. We wanted it to be a thing. Fitz goes, and breaks his hip like the old man he is, younger than me. But we were just talking before about how like everyone in the league is younger than me, but too old to be playing football anymore, and it just makes me sad. Not the point. So let's go through these trades for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. First, wide receiver upgrades. 10-team Superflex League. Straight up, CEH or Amari Cooper. The trade analyzer has CEH come in at 366.7, Amari Cooper at 319.7. I like this trade, and it's super even to me. but I think Amari Cooper has the better chance of those blow up games. Like I can see Amari Cooper putting up 30, 40 points, maybe like once or twice a season, but still like it happening. But they both have a floor of like a 6-point game. I mean, that's absolutely within the cards for both of them. Amari loves disappearing like two times a game, but he's still in a good enough offense where there's a good chance that won't happen. CEH, it doesn't matter how much the Chiefs are up, he still doesn't, like, if they're trying to run the clock out, they still pass the ball. So it's tough to ever see CEH, even in games that have such a positive game script for them, to really get 20-something carries, in which case he needs efficiency a lot because he'll never be able to be able to depend on that volume. So I think I side Cooper on this, especially in 10 teams where running back loses a little value when there's less teams. I get that the analyzer has this. I mean, 50 points is pretty much a third in the trade analyzer, so it's close enough as is. Helaire is technically worth more, but I take Cooper in this.
I do as well. And I also think, and Scott Connor said this really well, in my opinion, because they, in the Mannequin Chill episode from last week, which was like a direct reaction to Clyde's terrible week 2 performance, which was probably the worst game of his career. Scott said that Clyde could go the route of Josh Jacobs, or like a Miles Sanders type running back, where they're still valuable because it's a starting running back. The guy's going to get 15 plus touches a game and still have that kind of value for your roster, but nobody is going to want them. Like the trade market right now, I've been trying to trade Josh Jacobs in my home Dynasty league for about a year and a half now, and it's remarkable how insanely difficult it is to trade Josh Jacobs for anything even close to like starting value. Like I'm like adding a first to Josh Jacobs for like Joe Mixon or like Antonio Gibson, and I'm like, that's not I don't want to do that.
That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
So I think that Clyde, if he's going to go that route, I want to kind of bail out of that situation and go to a wide receiver, and that wide receiver, even in Amari Cooper, I think could still net you a better piece or a better running back later on, because like you said, he has that spike week potential. His ability and his production on a weekly basis to help your starting lineup is greater than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and that's going to resonate more in other managers and your other league mates, hearts and souls and stuff, and that's going to give them a better trade reaction than CEH, who right now I have CEH in that state. I have CEH, Josh Jacobs, and DeAndre Swift, and I'm like, nobody wants CEH either. Like nobody wants him either. I've tried to trade him for the past couple of weeks now, even after his good game this week, and it's already happening. Nobody wants CEH, so I would take Amari.
Yeah, I mean, we bring it back down to that the discussion we had with Derrick Henry, where dude literally set history in the amount of rushing yards and scored a ton of touchdowns, but he still wasn't the running back one in PPR fantasy because Kamara catches 80, 100 balls a year, and bam, that's just literally a quarter of his points in just receptions. Yeah. So it's tough for guys that don't catch the ball out of the backfield to be super fantasy relevant. And now, sadly, I mean, Nick Chubb is like such a great example. He's so good in the NFL. So good. Like the dude will, rush 9 times for 88 yards, but the problem is that's 8.8 fantasy points.
Yeah.
That's the unfortunate part of it. And I think that's where we are with CEH. That's where we are with Josh Jacobs. And it's to no fault of their own, again, because they are very good pass catchers. That's just not how the team wants to use them. So let's go on to our next wide receiver equivalent with a 12-team Superflex league of, again, straight up CEH, but this time for Juju Smith-Schuster. In 12-team Superflex, CEH comes in at 383.3, and Juju comes in at 230. So here's my deal. If your team isn't good, if your team is moving to next year, I take Juju in this. I think Juju's value is a little low. I think CEH value is a little high, in which case they sort of meet closer together in the middle. This Pittsburgh defense is kind of just done for the year. Their offensive line is
So
trash.
is their
Ben is
quarterback.
toast. The wide receivers aren't super healthy, and Najee's getting 19 targets a game. Or was it 17? Sorry, I don't want to.
19. Yeah, 19.
Yeah, come on. Like I said, Pittsburgh's offense is kind of done. Like, do we think if they change quarterbacks and bring in Dwayne Haskins or Mason Rudolph, things are going to can't get worse? Can they? I don't know. I feel bad saying that because of how bad Mason Rudolph looked last time.
I was
But
gonna
here's
say I
the
think
thing.
50% Big Ben is better than 100% Mason Rudolph.
Juju's a free agent at the end of the year, and he purposely signed the 1-year deal coming in this year, which means he's going to be a 25. He's still only going to be 25, a 25-year-old free agent who is going to get paid. He did the smart move, or his agent told him to do the smart move. Whoever wants to get the credit can take the credit. Sign the 1-year deal because the cap is down. Next year, when the NFL gets their TV money, teams are going to have a lot of money to spend. So he's going to get paid, which when you get paid, you're going to get the ball forced to you. I mean, let's face it, because GMs feel the need to justify what they just did. So going forward, again, into a situation, can you imagine being worse than what's going on right now? Probably not. You're going to get a 25-year-old wide receiver. Do you think Juju's a wide receiver 1 for a team? I don't think that matters, because regardless of if he goes into a situation where he's not the number 1, which means we think that's good for him, or he goes into a situation where he is number 1 and he's just getting a ton of targets. So good defense or drops aside, he's still getting a ton of volume, and good players do things with volume. So I am, if my team is bad, I take Juju because I think CEH will outscore Juju this year.
I disagree. I think that this is trying to get off of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and just kind of taking whatever somebody offered you. Like, I feel like this is like the Russ specialty where, like, hey, CH is gone by tomorrow night and best offer wins. And the best offer he got was Juju. So he was like true to his word. He took it and he said, yeah. But I think that this is too much. This is not enough to move off from Clyde Edwards-Helaire, in my opinion. Like, generally, whenever wide receivers and running backs are pretty similar, I'm just team running back just in general, because I think the wide receiver position is pretty flat, especially in this Juju Smith-Schuster tier. Like, I could probably get 20 other wide receivers that do the exact same thing, and maybe a dozen of them have similar dynasty value and projection going forward. So I'm going to take the starting running back, who I think can still perform pretty similarly to Juju on 8 or 9 targets a game, and just keep that. And then, not to mention the fact that, you know, if Juju were to sign somewhere else next year, just to kind of take devil's advocate, you know, he could sign in a semi better situation, or at least a lateral situation. Best case scenario, maybe he signs somewhere like what Curtis Samuel did. He gets paid a bunch to be the wide receiver 2 for a team behind an already established wide receiver 1 like Curtis Samuel, and Curtis Samuel's value didn't jump all that much. And I don't think Juju's will either, especially if he's not the wide receiver 1. And Kenny Galladay's didn't climb all that much higher either. I know they're kind of apples and oranges there, but, you know, those situations don't really matter, and the value doesn't really change for wide receivers that we don't view as alphas already, unless they start to perform like Allen Robinson. But that's a whole different, you know, conversation. So I'll take Clyde Edwards-Helaire here, because I think Juju is not enough, and you're just trying to get off of Clyde to get off of Clyde.
Okay, so I opened up the trade analyzer just to see what future picks are worth, and a 22 second is worth 91.3. So let's pretend it's Juju in 2 seconds. That value evens out pretty much close enough, because we're at a 153 point difference. And again, 30 points is a 22 third. So if we are talking about evening out value, would you do something like this? Is it just because it's straight up that bothers you, or
I think so.
Okay, I was just curious if
like,
you agreed with a lot of the stuff I said. Pretty much is what it comes down to, because I get that you're being a stickler for the numbers, for the value of it. I think 2 seconds, short of being awesome trade chips in the future, whatever.
That's kind of how I am. Like like if you add 2 seconds, it's like 2 seconds is nice. Like I wouldn't do it for Juju in 1 second still. Like I'm still pretty
Okay.
firm on that one. The
Okay.
2 seconds is nice, but it's just kind of like, what am I getting back with both of those seconds? Unless I'm able to package them in some sort of deal to get a better asset or maybe a first rounder, and
It's
it
usually
is
what you do with most second round picks. So
right. And I guess it is like super flex seconds. So that at least makes it a little bit better,
yep.
but the class next year is still kind of suspect at this point. So,
I still think people get so excited about drafts and draft picks and all this stuff that even if like we can try and convince ourselves that it's a weaker class, we still like, ooh, a lot of picks, huh? I could do stuff with that. At least that's how my brain works.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the running back equivalents because this is an interesting one. Okay. 12 team, 1 quarterback. We have Clyde Edwards-Helaire on one side by himself. He just likes going by himself. 550.2 in this scenario for J.K. Dobbins, Damian Harris, and a 23 second. Those things total 568.3, so practically even. Let me just break through the individual players because I think it matters here. 378.5 for Dobbins, 184.5 for Harris, 77.1, and there is a 71-point package adjustment, so it's pretty much the second is irrelevant, according to the analyzer. What's the difference in a healthy year between Dobbins and CEH? What we know CEH is right now, and Dobbins, what we know the Ravens are with their running backs, which are insanely similar. So, like, let's pretend, because that's what we have to do, because dynasty value is very perceived. Let's pretend J.K. Dobbins, before the season even starts, before preseason even starts, we get J.K. Dobbins is going to be healthy for training camp, which means definitely healthy for week 1. Do you think there's a value difference between J.K. Dobbins and Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
Not really. And if there was, I bet you it would have been Dobbins over CEH, if I remember the offseason pretty well.
Yes, this past offseason that just happened, Dobbins was ahead. But I don't know if coming off the ACL, people are a little bit worried. We see that the running game is not doing anything, even though we're talking about Latavius Murray, Devonta Freeman, and Tyson Williams. So who the hell's that? But to me, this is pretty easily the Dobbins side. You can plug Harris in where Harris has the same situation, just on a worse offense. Not as good of an offense, but still not catching the ball. But you can still plug him in your running back 2 slot and survive. You're getting a future second, like which we talked about before, is a wonderful trade chip. And in a couple of months, you're getting someone who will be valued as a top 15 running back easily.
Yeah.
So in Dobbins. So to me, this is pretty easily the Dobbins side.
Yeah, I agree, because I think you're kind of hitting the reset button on Clyde and hoping that the situation is better with J.K. Dobbins. And the ACL injury, I think, is fine just because we've seen a whole bunch of running backs recently. Yeah, it's almost like a rite of passage for running backs at some point in their career to get an ACL injury. But we've seen many of them.
Not too far off, yeah.
Yeah. We've seen many of them come back. I mean, Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley's back and doing Saquon things again in this past week. And Nick Chubb had a horrible knee injury in college. Like, we've seen a bunch of running backs in the past, 5-6 years just come back from ACLs. And they're exactly the same as what they were before. So you're just really waiting on that year in J.K. Dobbins. And that's where I like the Damian Harris piece coming in, because I think Harris, if you're looking for production, Harris and Clyde probably aren't all that different production-wise. And honestly, Damian Harris probably has a better chance at scoring rushing touchdowns because he's a better goal line back, even with potentially less opportunities inside the goal line. Although the Chiefs don't really have all that much because they can just score from the 50-yard line at will. But I like the J.K. Dobbins side for the same reason as you.
Yep. All right. We have one more running back equivalent. We have CEH in a 22 first, which comes in at a total of 607.7 for Sir Nicholas Chubb at 573.8. So a difference of 34. Nick Chubb absolutely has a higher ceiling than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Nick Chubb also can catch the ball, doesn't usually get targets, but every once in a while he gets a game with 2 to 4 catches. Nick Chubb also gets 60-yard runs for touchdowns, where it doesn't seem like CEH has done that yet. Yeah. So, And also the number of touches will always be in Chubb's favor. My question is, value-wise, I know the first makes sense. To me, value-wise, this is kind of right. But would I bother doing it is the thing that's going to be sticking in the back of my head, and I don't think the answer is yes. I mean, you're probably going to have, over the season, the difference of 4-5 points per game at most, difference between the two of them. And at the cost of a first, I think you can find other ways to affect your score in your lineup than by paying a first to get a better running back. At least one that doesn't have, without Kareem Hunt going out, he doesn't really have that top 5 upside because he doesn't catch the ball.
Yeah. I feel exactly the same way as you. That's literally what my first thought was before, like when I was putting this in, was, do I add a first round pick to a mid RB2, low end RB2 for a borderline RB1, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously some people could have Nick Chubb a lot higher, but that's just kind of where he is whenever he doesn't really have a whole bunch of receiving workload, and he relies on those touchdowns. Like coming into last week, he had scored a rushing touchdown in 16 or 17 straight games.
Wow.
Which was absolutely insane. And that's actually, if he would have done it, he didn't score a rushing touchdown this last week, but if he had, that would have tied the NFL record for most games, consecutive games with a touchdown.
That's a shame.
So you can see how important Nick Chubb's relevancy in fantasy football is dependent on those rushing touchdowns. And while he's currently the RB8 right now, averaging 16 fantasy points per game, has 3 rushing touchdowns and 3 receptions. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire is all the way down here at RB25 at 11 points per game. So the difference, like you said, was 5 fantasy points per game. But that's with Clyde not doing anything for 2 weeks and having 1 solid game last week. And it's still, I don't know if I would pay that first. I don't like it'd be different if it was like Clyde and a first for Dalvin Cook, you know, or like,
which, I mean, don't get me wrong, you can't get that.
You can't do that.
But what you're saying is that level of running back, that level of upgrade.
Right. Like, would you do Clyde and a first for Zeke?
Yeah. I believe in Zeke this year, just this year, but I'm still there.
Eckler.
I love Eckler.
Mixon?
No.
Gibson.
Before the season, yes. Right now, no.
Yeah. And then you start getting into like David Montgomery level. And at that point, it's just like, you're not doing that at all. Yeah. So I don't think I would I don't know if I would add a first on top of Clyde to do that.
All right. But no, we're talking a lot about pick value. So I want to move on to this. You have pick equivalent in 1QB and in Superflex. Now, we've talked about on this show before how pick values in the trade analyzer are constant. They don't change between settings. It's just the values of the players around them change. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire in a 12-team 1 quarterback league is 550.2. A 22 first is worth 253.3. So we are saying 2 firsts for Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, I put both these trades here because the trade finder was littered with Clyde for a first, Clyde for a first and a third, Clyde for a first and Quintez Cephas. Like basically like that's what people are doing right now in 1 quarterback and in Superflex. Are you bailing on Clyde for a reset button on a first round pick next year? Like that's really like where
we are still too early to play the guessing game on 22 picks, like where they'll land. Yeah, there's still so much time for a team to go from 3-0 to, oh man, how many games do we have now? 14-3. There's 3-0 team to go 3-14, like just to lose every game here on out. So it's way too early to say it would have to be a mid first, but like that's where I'm going to say it anyway, because that's the only way I would feel safe. Like if I see this team is just so blah, that it would take more than the assets they have on their team to make themselves a playoff team, I think I do that. Because I mean, if we're going to get specific about it, we're getting into a draft that should have 2 to 3 quarterbacks and 2 to 3 running backs. And right away, that's half That's your non-playoff teams. So if you can tell me that I'm going to get a non-playoff first round pick, yeah, I think I do it, especially on a team where I don't need his production, which I'm assuming is the case if you're trading him away just for picks. Wait, before we keep going, CEH is 383.3 in 12-team Superflex, and that pick is still 253.3, which is a difference of 130, which I mean, there's nothing that's actually worth 130, so that's pretty much a second and a third. I mean, 2 seconds is even too much because that totals to 180. So to me, yeah, if I can do the not right thing and try and guess where this pick is going to land, and I firmly believe that it will not be a playoff team, I'll do that.
Yeah, it's where do you want to place your bet? Do you want to place your bet that Clyde kind of gets out of the slump and does, you know, at least helps your team at an RB2 level or something like that? Or do you want to bet that first is a top half pick? You know,
or just even bet that pick will go up in value by the end of the season more than CEH will go up in the end of the season by the end of the season. You know, if you don't believe in CEH, then chances are, and you're willing to trade him for a first, chances are that pick will be worth more to you, even more to you at the end of the season than CEH will have been worth.
Yeah.
Like, so I think pretty much sticking on first. Yeah.
I think you can basically get Clyde, get a Clyde running back in next year's class. Like I'm guarantee you that we're going to be at a point, not maybe the RB1 and the RB2, but the RB3 or 4 in the class are going to be like right around where Clyde already is. Like, I don't necessarily know what the rankings are right now, but I'm thinking like, you know, there probably is going to be a debate. Would you rather have Clyde or CJ Verdell, the Oregon running back? Or would you rather have Isaiah Spiller's probably too high, is going to be probably valued over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So that case, he's probably going to be a top 3 or 4 pick. And if that first is not that, you're not getting Isaiah Spiller. So it's just, but Clyde is going to be in that discussion. You know, the whole, like, if Clyde was in this draft class, where would he rank among running backs? And he's going to be like probably 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
So hitting the reset button on a first next year is probably not the worst idea and might actually be better at this point.
There's more risk in, if you plan to use that pick, there's absolutely more risk in it because, you know, draft picks can bust. I mean, you can draft that pick, could end up being the 103, in which case you miss out on the top 2 quarterbacks. You get that RB1 and they might just not work in the NFL. I mean, Trent Richardson, man, like, you know, there's been more since him, but that's just the easiest one that always comes to mind. Like, it's an absolute possibility and something you have to keep in your mind. But
people have uttered Trent Richardson for Clyde already.
Oh, come on. No, that too far. Trent Richardson averaged 1 yard per carry on 80 carries a game. At least CEH does better than that. All right, we are going to wrap this up now with our horrible trades. And it starts out with a 12-team 1 quarterback league. The 2023 first, 2024 picks are not in the analyzer yet. So it's worth even less than what it says on here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Darrell Williams. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire for Brian Edwards, Larry Roundtree, and a 24 firsts. Okay, so remember when we said we'd be willing to trade? Okay, that was even, this is a 1 quarterback league and a 24 first. Just to put it out there, everything when we're saying a first, we mean the closest one to us. So right now it is September 29th, 2021. The next draft coming up is the 2022 draft. So when we say a first, we specifically mean a 22 first.
Mm-hmm.
That's really far away. A 24 first. Brian Edwards, we want to be a thing. We haven't seen him be a thing yet, even though what is Derek Carr doing? He's doing well. He's
an overtime thing.
Overtime. It's more than that, but that
you should get 2 points per reception in overtime. Brian Edwards would be a superstar.
All right, that time to make that league, I guess, for this guy. And Larry Roundtree, who apparently is the second running back in Los Angeles. I still go to say San Diego. And that it don't matter. Like, none of that is.
He cancels out Darrell Williams. This is Clyde for Brian Edwards in the 24 first.
Yeah. And still, the answer is very, very easily CEH here, because CEH is probably going to outscore Brian Edwards for 2-ish years. And that first still won't be relevant.
You're not going to be able to move that first for another, like, 1.5 years or 2 years.
At least for
you
decent
know.
value. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're not going to be able to do that until 2022 next year at minimum for decent first round ish value. Like 23
Yep.
firsts are being coveted now because we expect that class to be really good, but that's still 2 years in the future. 2024, we don't know anything about that class because that's like this year's recruits. and and yeah, that's 3 years in the future. So boy,
Yep.
don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
But you know what you should do? You should always be checking out the DLF Trade Show, because that's what we just finished doing. I am your host, Russ Fisher at Dynasty Outhouse. He is also your host, Addison Hayes at AmazeHayes_ Hey, it's my birthday. And that was supposed to be in the middle. Oh, man, I screwed that up. Too bad. Not going back, because we are done. See you later, everybody.
So, Russ, we had a comment from the video last week, which was a fantastic comment. It was basically asking for kind of a conversation on fair trade values and, trade proposals, because this guy said that he's been struggling with sending out trade proposals and has actually offended other managers unintentionally with his trade proposals, because he's not sure if that's a common thing, or maybe he's overvaluing or undervaluing certain players in these trade proposals. And I know I had that problem when I first started out, just like him, with, offending people for trade proposals and stuff. Not like where you're offering Mike Davis for like Christian McCaffrey because McCaffrey's hurt, but like you think that it could be pretty fair and you could see the arguments, but maybe the other person is just way on the opposite side and he's laughs in your face, and that doesn't feel good. So I guess we can have kind of a conversation on how do you go about sending trade proposals, or making sure that the trade proposals are fair, that they work for you and they work for the other person. Just go about that whole thing, because you have way more trade experience than I do with all this.
So yeah, trading is my jam. DLF Trade Show, Trade Addict Show. I'm going to preface this. Thank you for the question. It is an awesome question that I think we overlook, because we just assume that everyone knows what they're doing. We assume that everyone's been doing this for the years like we are. So we don't talk about the essentials of trading enough. Mm-hmm. But first, I'm going to talk to not the person that asked this question, but the people he's referring to. All right. So the guy who asked this question, just take a seat for a second and just read a book. Everyone else, those other people, stop. You should not be getting offended by trade offers. This is a game. Calm down. And if you're getting offended by a dude who at least has the courage to admit he's not completely sure he knows what he's doing, you should just use the opportunity to help him get better. Like that's what you're supposed to do as a human being. Forget as a league mate. Like, sit, calm, woosah, to have some tea, whatever you do to calm down. Deep breaths, do some stretches, some yoga. I am not bendy enough to do yoga, but like whatever you need to do it. Calm down. All right. Dude who asked the question, you can put your book down. Put that bookmark in there. You don't want to lose your place. All right. First things first. Good on you for sending offers anyway. Good on you for trying. Especially when you're getting such crap responses from crappy people. Good for you to keep trying. Let me be a company man for a second. What's a great way to know value? Sign up for DLF, man. Besides the analyzer, besides the ADP, which are awesome tools to be able to put value together, because let's be honest, we even at times say we disagree with the analyzer. It's absolutely going to happen. It's a consensus that it tries to put together. And what makes it even harder is each league is its own market. We've said that before. But what that really means is, let's pretend that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is literally worth 550.2 points. Like that's his literal value across the world. But in your league, the person you're trying to deal with just doesn't like CEH. Or let's pretend the person who has CEH is a Chiefs fan and is a bit of a homer about it. That changes CEH's value in your league differently than it does in any other league. So that's how you have to think about this kind of stuff. When you have a league filled with Giants fans, Giants players might be worth more than they are to people in who hates the Giants in Dallas or in Philly, where they're obviously going to be less because Eagles fans and Cowboys fans hate the Giants. So you have to think of things both at a macro level where what is this guy's value to the world, but shrink that down into what is it worth to these, let's pretend you're in a 12-team league, these other 11 people.
Mhm.
I guess 12 because you have to consider yourself as well, because that your value does absolutely matter in this conversation. And that is always tough to do, but the best you can do, again, use other tools, talk to people. Like before you send, like, sending out cold offers is absolutely acceptable. It is absolutely what some people prefer, and I do it practically every single day. But especially when you're new and you don't really understand things, especially if you're in a league with people you don't know, hopefully you have a league chat going. Just start talking. Get them talking about players, even if it's not players on your team or players you're looking to acquire. You can sort of learn the kind of players they like. You're in a league with certain people that just love slot receivers. Okay, well, I'm not going to trade you. I'm not going to try and offer you whoever Julio Jones X kind of player is. Okay, he probably likes Rondale Moore more than he likes Jamar Chase because it's that different body type, that kind of player they like. You start to learn things and you start to see how people value things. To me, compiling all of that, putting it together, that's how you get values. That's the a little bit of unfortunate truth. I wish there was an answer. I wish there was just that's this guy's value, but it's just not a reality. So how do you learn? First of all, do exactly what you're doing. Keep sending offers. Throw in the comments, I'm not sure how to value this guy. I think he's worth this. And spell out what you think his value is in picks, or hey, I think he's worth a little bit less than this ridiculous offer I'm sending you. What do you think? What would you think he's worth? And if you have good league mates, even if they don't send you a counter offer, which is always super helpful, hopefully they'll at least say, no, you're wrong. He's not worth even close to that. In which case, all right, take it back a step. Learn as you go. It's really no easy way. It's absolutely reps. Just keep going, and then you sort of just learn as you go. And it's dangerous, but ask Twitter. You're never going to get a straight answer from Twitter, especially from trade polls, because you have to just hope people read all of the details in a trade poll, because leagues are very unique most of the times. But still, it's a great way to get your finger on the pulse of what our community, which drives a lot of dynasty value, thinks of certain players.
Mhm.
All of that put together is how you gauge value. And always, always, always recognize people overvalue players that are already on their team. Because
Yes.
the person thinks of it in a way of, oh, they want to take this guy from me, they're going to have to do this. Or wow, I'm going to move this guy, man, I like him, so I'm going to have to get this. So every single person is absolutely guilty of it. They'll value players a little more because they're on their team already. I just spit a lot of information out at once and didn't stop breathing, so I'm going to give Addison a chance to talk now and just let that all soak in.
Yeah. I mean, those are all fantastic points. And I mean, it is something that, like I said, I definitely learned coming into and starting out Dynasty just, a few years ago, was learning trade values, learning where draft picks, specifically first round picks, where do they come into
Yes.
play, stuff like that, because that is all very important for trade value. And I will say, having people in the community laugh at or mock trade calculators, because they're like, oh, you can't just make trades based off of trade calculators or whatnot, or those things aren't always accurate, especially whenever different companies, like our trade calculator calculates player values different than Dynasty Trade Calculator, which calculates it different than the Dominator thing that Roto Underworld has, which they're all very different. And so, but I still think it's important that you get access, or run something through at least one of those, because then I feel like you're getting some sort of a gauge of consensus, right? Like
Yep.
you could be drastically off from a consensus value, and then that might help you understand like where you need to go. I've certainly done that, even just recently. In my DLF Champions Cup league, I will just say, you know what, this is in my head. Let me just double check to make sure that that makes sense. Because I'm like, maybe Chase Edmonds in a second does not get me, you know, Clyde Edwards-Helaire or something like that. But like in my mind, I think it might.
Yep.
And so just like run it by. And if it's, well within reason, like for the DLF trade analyzer, you see anything within like 50 to 100 points is basically even. Like that's like a third or a late second round pick. And you can talk about those differences later on with counter offers or through league chat, like you said. And just be like, hey, I think we're close, but I need like, this throw in and we're good to go. Or something like that. Or on the flip side, if you send a cold trade offer and it's an overpay, it's just going to be accepted, and you hopefully you're fine with that. If it
Yeah.
wasn't too much of an overpay, but um, that I think it's all very important. And if you say, especially at the running back position, running back is always going to be the position that everybody values the most because there's fewer of them. They have higher ceilings because they touch the ball more on a weekly basis, at least at the top. So running backs are always going to be coveted more by fantasy players than most other positions, other than like quarterback in a super flex league. And we see that in ADP. We see that in rookie drafts where running backs get vaulted over almost every single wide receiver, maybe other than like if we have one true alpha like we did this year in Jamar Chase, like all the other running backs are going to be ahead of them.
I've been playing fantasy football for half of Addison's life. But I mean, I've been playing Dynasty for like 5-6 years. And, again, Trade Addicts podcast, DLF Trade Show, I can at least talk pretty well about trades to the point where people actually listen. I send a lot of bad offers, some of them on purpose, some of them not. It's funny, I replied to a trade rejection today from an offer I sent yesterday, and the dude's just like, dude, really? And I'm like, I am sorry. Why did I ever think this was a good idea? Like, sometimes something seems like a good idea at the moment, and then when you see that rejection, you're just like, oh, my bad.
Right.
And sometimes, again, if you're being a jerk to a guy who doesn't know what they're doing, first of all, boo on you. Second of all, it's going to keep happening unless you help him get better. Them get better. So
You know what
seriously,
you do? If you cold trade somebody and they're like, wow, this is awful, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I forgot. You do a little bit of research. You go, I forgot to click on this guy's name and send it over to you.
oh, don't no, screw that. Don't even pander to that, because let's be honest. Let's talk about the bigger picture here. For me personally, trading is probably the most fun in Dynasty Fantasy Football. This is a game you play for fun. If you're in a league full of jerks and you're not having fun, it's time to join a new league. That's
Get out
really
of
what
there.
it comes down to. If you're in a league where people are giving you a hard time because you're trying to learn, that's not a group of people you want to be in a league with. It's week 4, so it's a little tough to do something about that right now, but like, start planning for next year. Find a group of people. If you're hopefully on Twitter, so many good people around, so many good people create too many leagues every single year that you'll be able to get into a league with some decent people. And if not, hit me up at Dynasty Outhouse. I'll find you one.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Russ, you the trades that your trade addicts leagues are probably like the best people in the industry that ever existed. So you could probably make a league for this guy.
No more leagues. No more leagues.
Yeah. I hope that helped though. I hope that helped with offering trades, understanding value, stuff like that. So,
And
you know,
seriously, if you are about to hit propose and you're freaking out about it, DM me at
yeah,
Dynasty Outhouse. They're open. I
DM
will
me.
absolutely, whenever I actually check my phone, because sometimes my wife yells at me that I look at my phone too much, so I have to put it down. As soon as I see it, I will answer you. I will let you know, and I will be honest, and I'll tell you. But the thing is, if it sucks, I'll tell you why it does, and I'll help you. Even just, man, show me teams. Seriously, I I want you to have the kind of fun I'm having. So I will take the time to help, as everyone else should. but not everyone else is a nice person. But I'm being way too negative and it's freaking me out. So end this now.
Yeah, I hope that helped. So hopefully, as you go forward, like I say, you can message me, you can message Russ. We can help figure some things out for you. And if you need a subscription to DLF, let me know as well. Maybe, with some things like that. But I would highly recommend getting access to at least one trade calculator that you like. If it's not us, it's DTC or somebody else like that.
I
I'd
have
recommend doing
subscriptions to
that.
both.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
DLF, cover your ears. Yeah, I give.
you can get subscriptions to both of them and then run the trade through both of them and then see if
Which
there's
I
differences and stuff.
absolutely do. Just gonna put it out
So
there.
yeah, so hopefully that helped. And if you have any more questions, or if anybody else got to this point and they liked what they heard from this addendum kind of thing, and they want some other sort of theory or other conversation and stuff like that, leave a comment down below and we can talk about it kind of in this format that's a little separate than the show. And yeah, I'm not as good as closing out shows as you, Russ. So I guess we're just gonna close the
Bye.
addendum. Bye.